folks. Thanks for tuning in to the next episode of Sarah's Camping Show. Joined by myself, Ben, and my colleague, Lauren. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Wow, that's calm. Cool, calm and collected today. If you haven't already, you can subscribe via YouTube. If you also want to watch us on video, you can do it on Spotify. It is Spotify,
yeah,
not
it is
Shopify.
Spotify now.
I was going Shopify and Spotify, get them mixed up. You can watch and listen on Spotify, and you can listen on your favorite podcast app as well. Now, today's on another today's episode is another Ben's Geeked Out on another journey of discovery. Just looking for excuses.
I'm really loving this resurgence.
Just looking for an excuse to spend a morning researching stuff that I can justify work time on. So this one started out with the question around, I don't know where I got it from, but do you need to season a swag? And it kind of led to a slightly bigger topic around what makes a fabric waterproof. So I thought it's one thing just to say yes or no, but it's another thing to maybe understand why you need to waterproof it and what makes the fabric waterproof and how it kind of what treatments and things a fabric needs to make it actually waterproof. Can you re-waterproof a fabric, et cetera, et cetera? So
yeah.
Now we did cover a little bit on Waterhead ratings, which we'll touch on a little bit in this episode, but this isn't Waterhead ratings, but Zempire was on board on an episode with waterproof ratings in episode 16.
Ages ago.
That's a long time ago. And also...
What are we now, like 160 something?
Or something, way past it. And I also wrote a blog on Waterhead ratings called Waterhead Ratings Explained to try and keep it simple. So we touch on some of that in this episode, but this is more around the fabrics themselves, trying to understand what turns just a woven fabric into something that keeps it dry. So there's kind of, I put into three classifications. Like a waterproof fabric is not going to let water through. There's always limitations to these things, but in a standard use, waterproof fabric, water hits one side, doesn't come through to the other side. Water resistant fabric. So those waterproof fabrics usually have some sort of application of a coating or something, or a laminated makeup to stop that water coming through. Water resistant is tightly woven fabric that will resist water, but at some point it's going to wet out and water's going to start to soak through. And then water repellent is more just the coating on the outside. So you can make anything water repellent, be like waxing your car, help the water bead off, but the water repellency treatments aren't actually creating waterproofness. It's actually helping with breathability more than anything.
It's probably also worth mentioning that you can have the terms of waterproof and water resistant applied to things like clothing and bags as well.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of cases, the material itself could actually be waterproof. But the reason why the product is water resistant is because the zips aren't waterproof, or there's other components of the bag that would still allow ingress under certain conditions.
Yeah, that's right. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, good point. Different ratings, different uses for fabrics too. I'll touch on a little bit, like if you sort of think a tent fly needs to be really waterproof, but in actual fact, the floor needs to be waterproof because of the mechanical forces applied to the floor on a wet surface. So this is a bit of a high level education, but don't come out thinking there's a black and white answer to it all, because there's a whole lot of, as always, always seems to be, it depends.
And there's also that's probably a really good disclaimer point, because I have recently had a customer phone up who was trying to compare 3 different tents, and the choice was coming down to whether or not 500 mil more in a water floor rating and the material. And it's just like, you're overcomplicating it for yourself. Like realistically, when you're looking at the tents, all of the tents that you've got on offer, they're all going to do exactly what you want them to do. Choose the features. And it's like, oh, but this is made from this material and this is made from this material. And why does this one not have a waterhead rating on the floor and then this one does, and then this, and then I've read a blog and the blog said that you need at least this amount because of, X, Y, Z. And it's like, come on, people have been buying camping gear for years and just not caring about this stuff and being happy as Larry.
Yeah.
So it's good to geek out on it, but at the same time,
you can get lost in it. You
can get lost in it, and it's not. It realistically, that it's not like you say. There's no black and white.
Well, I read a heap of articles yesterday. Watched videos. One article in particular that I read was a tent manufacturer they did this test on fabric. So 200 days, they had this frame set up in the sun in the desert, and they just had big panels of these fabrics sitting out, and they tested them over a period of time to the point that one of them had just fallen apart, wasn't even there anymore. And even though, so the general rule is polyester generally more UV resistant than nylon, for example. So this is testing UV resistance. But at the end of the period, that black and white approach of polyester is more UV resistant than nylon was thrown out the door because they had nylon fabrics that outperformed polyester based on coatings and that sort of thing that were applied to it. So
correct.
Unless you're going to get down to the science of what type of nylon or polyester, what type of PU coating, how many coatings,
how it's applied,
how it's all of these things. And even then, it's not going to help you make a decision because you're just going to have all this data that says that one's better here, but that one's better here, but that one's better, that one. And it's not going to help. So don't get too caught up in it.
Yeah, get caught up more in people's real life feedback on the product and the trust in the brand and the people you're buying it from.
And everything has a time, lifespan. And think of that end of that lifespan being an exciting time when you get to buy something new.
Yeah, correct.
Now, so I'll touch a little bit on Waterhead or Hydrostatic head at the moment before we go into the coatings and things of fabric. So just to clarify, support what you were saying there, that is a very specific test on new fabric in a lab. As soon as that fabric goes and gets used, has UV exposure, has dirt, that all changes. It's tested as new in a lab on a there's a few different tests at a very rudimentary level. It's a column of water with a fabric attached to the bottom of it, and it's filled up, and that creates pressure. And at some point, that water starts to seep through. Nowadays, there's something called a pseudo tester that's used because if you think of something with a 10,000 millimeter waterhead, that's a really long column that's sticking up and unreasonable to think you can actually operate like that. So they have a pseudo tester that applies pressure to the fabric to the point that it starts to leak through, and they can work out the waterhead rating from that. But as I mentioned, this doesn't consider also on top of what I said before with how it changes as soon as you start to use it, it doesn't consider the durability, something like constant folding of the fabric. If you take a piece of fabric and test it, and then you go and you fold it 400 times and then test the same thing, it's probably going to leak through that fold bit because that coating is going to break down. And just and mechanical forces and wind-driven rain. So we talk about rain. So just light rain, it's going to be waterproof. Wind-driven rain needs a different waterhead, because it's got a higher force. And then standing on a tent floor, 60, 80 kilo person standing on a tent floor creates more force on that one point than it does sheet rain over a fly. So it's just not that black and white. Once again, that has 5,000 mil waterhead, that has 1,500, therefore that's more waterproof than that. It's not the case.
Not the case, yeah.
Do keep this in mind though, that generally if it's 1,000 millimeter waterhead, it's waterproof.
Yeah.
It's considered to be waterproof from 1,000 millimeters. I've seen rain jackets that are 600, 800. They're probably waterproof in a light shower. Most tents, I'd be comfortable with most tents being waterproof at 1,500. That's my barrier. Over that is a bit of marketing spiel, and there are downsides to actually a higher waterhead, potential downsides to a higher waterhead anyway, which I will go into now. Because this waterproof element comes from the coatings or how the fabric is laminated together to create that waterproof element. The most common is what you would have heard of as a PU coating, polyurethane, polyetherurethane or something. There's also polyetherurethane. I don't know the science of it. There's two different things, but the most common one is PU. This isn't a breathable membrane. It's applied in like a wet or a dry method. I couldn't find any real clear videos or anything on how that's done. All I could really find was what looked like fabric going through a roller with kind of a wet sponge with this stuff on it, and it's just applying this stuff to the fabric as it goes through, so it soaks into the fabric. That creates this plasticky you can usually see it on a fabric if it's got a shiny side. That's the PU coating. That's what creates the waterproof element of the fabric. It stops water going through. So you can take a non-waterproof fabric, soak this PU into it, and it becomes waterproof. Now, this is where it's really interesting that you can get a higher waterhead rating by putting more coatings on. Just keep adding more coatings, and the waterhead rating goes up. But that adds weight and decreases the tear strength of the fabric. And I knew it this I knew as of yesterday that it made the fabric less durable, but I didn't understand the tear strength thing. And if you think of a fabric that doesn't have any coating on it, right, it's all woven together, and those fibers can slide against each other, right? So if you go and try and tear that, they kind of bunch up in one spot. So it goes from trying to tear one fiber to trying to tear 3 or 4 or 6 or 10 in one. So it becomes hard to tear that because suddenly you're trying to tear 10 fibers at once. If you put a PU coating on that, they don't slip. So suddenly you're just tearing one and then one more, then one more, and then it tears because they're not bunching up. You're stopping the slippage of the fabric. So the slippage of the fabric gives it the tear strength.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So the more—
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So the more coatings you put on there, the heavier it gets, the less and less and less the fabric slips and it becomes a higher tear strength. So you might have something that's really waterproof, but just don't use it in the wind because it's just the guy rips going to tear off. A lower tear strength, sorry. Because the guy rips and stuff are going to tear off because the tear strength's gone. So outdoor manufacturers or any manufacturer is looking for a fabric that's got this balance of waterproof and tear strength and everything for the specific purpose it's being made for.
Which ultimately is why canvas is so bomb-proof, right?
Yeah, so we'll get on to canvas later. But yeah, a cotton canvas that doesn't have that coating is really tear-proof because it slips and it's got big, heavy fibers and it's tough. Now, an interesting thing here that a PU coating is actually hydrophilic, which means it soaks up water over time, over a really long time.
Interesting.
Now, this is really important to note for storage, that if you have had your tent in a really humid environment for a long period of time, and you take it home, you put it up for half an hour, it looks dry, you pack it away, that coating might be damp.
Yeah.
So you've got to dry that coating out because if you don't, and PU coatings will eventually succumb to something called hydrolysis, which is when that coating breaks down and the tent gets smelly. There's no stopping that. It will happen eventually with every outdoor equipment. A better quality coating is going to last longer. If you store it wet, you're speeding up that process. Once that starts, can't stop it.
Yeah.
Your tent's knackered. You're not going to be able to fix that.
Which is why we've talked a lot in the past about using a really large mesh bag and storing your fly separate if you can loosely.
Because that PU is reacting with the moisture in the air. So try to store it in a out of the UV
Airflow,
light in a dry environment because it reacts with the moisture in the air. So if you've bought something now and hope to use it in 10 years, store it correctly, keep an eye on it because that hydrolysis will take over eventually. And I mentioned there's a PE coating as well, which reduces tear strength a bit more. It doesn't absorb as much water. We're getting into a fair bit of chemistry now. I started to read into this and I went, no, too far,
the
back out.
polyethylene is not as flexible either, I think, from memory. It's more of like a rigid.
Yeah, there are some
from memory.
One site that I read, they said we don't know why it's not being used, but we're starting to see a little bit more of it. But I think it's a bit more expensive as well, like 30% more expensive.
Yeah.
But PU is the most common coating you'll find in, I guess, the affordable range of tents and jackets, but even the more expensive tents and things as well. Like Zempire's got their solution dyed nylon. I'm pretty sure they put a PU coating on it possibly. So, but the price comes from the fabric that they've used. But PU is the most commonly used coating. And then you've got there's siliconized fabrics as well. Now these I always thought siliconized fabrics were made up by each individual fiber being coated in silicon and then woven together. And that creates a water resistant sort of nature and allows slippage. So you've got that high tear strength, hence why you see big swags made with sil nylon because it's got a good tear strength because the fibers still slip a little bit. But you can also make a siliconized coating with like silicon on one side and PU on the other to create extra waterproofness. That needs to be applied properly because nothing sticks to silicon. So you got to make sure you got the PU coating and the silicon done really well. So you want a good quality siliconized fabric. Silicon is hydrophobic, so it doesn't soak up water or anything. And I guess that's maybe why a woven silicon fabric is quite good because it resists water anyway. It's got a natural water resistance. So that was, you might see sil, which is silicon on both sides, or sil nylon, which is silicon on one side, nylon on the other, or sil poly, silicon, polyester coatings on each side. as I mentioned, you've got to apply that correctly. But generally, slightly lower Waterhead ratings, and by lower, I still mean 1,500 mil, so it's still a waterproof fabric. But because you can't put as many PU coatings or as much on it, because you've got to watch how that adheres, you can't get the same sort of 5,000, 10,000 mil Waterheads. Tear strength is better, costs more, harder to seam seal. Once again, the silicon element of it, things don't stick to it. And then there's laminated, which we won't go into too much on this topic here because this is more for jackets and things, but we're talking Gore-Tex here. So that takes a membrane that is waterproof and breathable, allows water vapor through one way, doesn't allow water droplets in the other. There's different sizes in the molecules and things in there.
Yeah.
And then on one side, there'll be a fabric that's laminated to that for durability. And on the other side, it could be a print or another like trico layer on the inside. Now, they're really technical fabrics that are designed to keep water out, but also allow it to breathe.
Yeah.
So the PU coating doesn't breathe. These fabrics do breathe. They're much more expensive. Not generally found in tents. I know some tents, really technical tents, single skin tents in particular, do use a laminated fabric, but it's generally in jackets and things that you'll find this type of 2.5 or 3 layer fabric is usually what they class it as. So that's the waterproof. And then there's DWR, which we're now going into that kind of water resistant kind of category, I suppose. So DWR is durable water repellent finish. I always think of this as like waxing a car. You squirt your car
like duck
and
feathers.
water sort of sticks on it. Yeah, or duck feathers. And then you wax it and water beads up and it reduces the surface tension. So water runs off. It's kind of the first line of defense to a waterproof jacket is to try and get that water to bead off. So you don't even have to worry about the membrane or the layer keeping the water out. First line of defense is try and get it to bead off. Actually helps with breathability more than anything because the breathability of those technical fabrics require the outside of the fabric to be dry to push the moisture through so it can then evaporate. But if you've wet it out on the outside, it can't breathe anymore. So the DWI treatment helps that. It needs to be reapplied a number of times because it's just a coating. So you need to keep applying. And
it's on the
that.
Outside, so it's susceptible to degradation.
Degradation, abrasion like on elbows, shoulders from packs, dirt sort of settles in. The guy explained it that I saw about like kind of like little fingers sticking up, the water kind of runs over the top, and as soon as you get stuff in between it, the water just soaks through. So you do need to keep reapplying that. But that is what creates the water repellent fabric, I suppose. DWR can also be applied to the PU coated fabrics and the laminated fabrics to help that water bead off the surface so it doesn't wet out, become heavy. But you can also just take like a T-shirt, I suppose, and put a DWR coating on a T-shirt if you wanted, and water will bead off. But at some point you can kind of rub it in and it will soak through. And then non-waterproof fabrics, just woven fabrics that don't have any treatment. So water will soak into that. Doesn't have to be woven, I suppose. It can be like fleece and that, or fleece is woven anyway. But yeah, just a fabric with no treatment at all.
Like canvas.
So this leads me on to canvas, which is where this all of that I just talked about then led on to do I need to season my swag?
That's your geek search.
So canvas, if we talk about swag, we got canvas swag. Yeah. So traditionally, and you said before the show, I grew up with 100% canvas tents all my life and never had a problem. 100% canvas, no coating or anything, just 100% cotton canvas that's woven together. Technically not a waterproof fabric because it doesn't have a physical membrane to stop the fabric. But it swells up, it kind of wets out and creates this membrane, or it has a surface tension that allows the water to sort of run off. And this is where that whole thing where if you touch the canvas, it creates a wet spot because you break that surface tension and a spot where water can leak through and then drip down the inside of the tent. So you don't touch 100% canvas when it's wet. And seasoning that canvas allows it to swell up and kind of seal all the gaps in between. And then as cotton does, it shrinks, so tighter and tighter and tighter weave. So you get a tight weave. That's what creates the waterproof element with canvas. But there's always a limitation. Eventually it wets out, or wind-driven rain or mechanical forces can push water through that. You do need to season that to seal all the gaps and the stitching holes and those sort of things. Nowadays, the canvas is a polycotton. So they've added a polyester fiber in with the canvas, the cotton thread. That increases strength.
Which would have to be cost related.
I don't know about cost, but it increases strength, and it also allows the application of like PU coatings to canvas. So the canvas swags we've got in the shop today, with the exception of some of the 100% canvas ones, like AOS and some of those guys just made 100% canvas. Don't quote me on that. I don't think they have a PU coating, but I know like Dachi 230 use a PU coated polycotton canvas. Now the polyester allows the addition of a ripstop fiber in there. So you'll see the cross thread quite often, and you get a thicker polyester thread in there that adds a ripstop element to it. And the polyester element also just helps with strength of the fabric. Now you don't technically need to season these because the swags, the fabric itself is waterproof because it has a PU coating on it. The seams are seam sealed on the inside, which is, I imagine it would be a lot harder with a thick canvas fabric than it would a thin, 30 denier nylon jacket. But technically that's waterproof out of the box. However, it doesn't hurt to season it, and we'd actually recommend it because you still have stitching holes and that sort of thing, and there's still an element of canvas in there or cotton in there. So if you season it, all you're doing is allowing that cotton to swell and shrink, tighten all the weave up, close up all the little stitching holes, and add an extra element of waterproofness to it. They've probably got a DWI treatment on it, so you probably find you squirting it and it's all just running off anyway, but it doesn't hurt to season your swag. It's not going to do anything bad, and probably a good thing when you first get it, just to take it in the backyard and hose it down to make sure there isn't some manufacturing issue that has caused a leak. Better to do it in your backyard than when you're out in the trail. So,
yeah, just out of curiosity, I Googled it, and apparently 100% cotton canvas is becoming less common because, one, accessibility and cost. It's cheaper to do polyester. Two, environmental. There's been culturally a shift away from cotton farms from an environmental perspective in terms of water usage and chemical usage, et cetera, which I think is probably a little bit hilarious because I'm sure polyester also uses a significant amount of energy and water and chemicals to produce something, a fabric made out of plastic.
There's always two sides to the story.
In which case you'd probably argue that it comes down to ultimately cost and availability.
Well, cost to manufacture, but also cost to the end user as well. You look at 100% cotton canvas swags; they're not cheap. They're 2 to 3 times the price of what the good quality swags from like 230 and Dachi that we sell, and others. They're all good quality. But the cost, for a basic full cotton canvas swag, you're probably talking $900 plus, whereas you could get a similar structure for $300 to $400.
I'm pretty sure Burke and Wills, their swags were 100% cotton canvas, weren't they?
I think so. It is.
And they
expensive.
we used to sell them, and they also didn't have like polyurethane flooring or anything. They were 100% cotton canvas everywhere.
I think that story too, when you talk about expense, they're probably expensive because those brands are using good quality cotton canvas. There's probably also cheap quality cotton canvas.
I don't know. I would question whether or not you could, we're totally getting off topic here, but 100% cotton canvas to me would suggest high quality because it's not produced very readily and the cost tends to be a bit more prohibitive. So I would have thought that you wouldn't like 100% cheap 100% cotton canvas is a bit of a misnomer.
Maybe cheap's not the way to refer to it. I know I've got a backpack that I bought from somewhere and it's made from old truck canvas, and it's torn a little bit. But if I look at the canvas, it's got a much looser thread than if I think of the AOS swags, their canvas, I'm pretty sure that was 100% cotton, was really tight thread, really stiff fabric. I know that the swag I've got, I'm pretty sure is 100% cotton canvas.
Thick, stiff.
Really tight, stiff thread. So that comes down to the tightness of the thread. So I guess if you're making a fabric that is far tighter thread, you're using a lot more material in it, so it's going to cost more anyway. So you could probably make a cheaper fabric, not cheaper by quality, but a looser sewn canvas out of the same material that's not going to cost as much because you haven't put as much thread and everything into it.
Yeah, I can't explicitly see anything on Birkenwheel's website that says what the canvas is made out of.
No, generally I
feel like it was from memory.
I like to get into these details. A lot of brands don't sort of specify this. They just go canvas. And there's a lot of brands out there now too that will say canvas or something, and you look at it and you think if there's any cotton in that. To me, canvas has got to have a fairly large element of cotton in it. That's your traditional canvas.
Yeah.
I can understand polycotton canvas. It still has that canvas feel, but there's a lot of stuff out there now that they say is canvas, and you look at it.
It's not canvas.
But it's not. You can tell it's polyester or it's a synthetic.
Sometimes
That's not bad.
Sometimes I think if I go onto a supplier's website and I can't see those specifics, I'm just like, why?
What are you hiding?
What are you hiding?
Yeah. I'm the same. Yeah. But that's not to say use Ostense RX. We talked about that before. They've got what they call their ModCon canvas. They kind of hit it a little bit under the canvas banner, but it is a polyester. When that first came out, we went, you've got your 8-ounce canvas that works really well. They were confident.
Wasn't it something to do with fire retardancy or something?
Well, I didn't get onto it with this, but a lot of these coatings and things, there are some barriers around how you can apply certain coatings to meet fire retardant requirements as well. So that's another element that these manufacturers have to put in to these fabrics, because you choose something that goes, it does all that, but I can't do this, but I need to have this. So suddenly then you've got to balance waterproof, breathability and fire retardedness into the fabric that does all of those three things best. So,
and I have recently, I can't remember where I saw it, but I have recently seen someone doing a full polyester fabric that when you looked at it and touched it, you were like, this is canvas, but it wasn't. And it had something to do with how the polyester was treated before the material was woven to give it that appearance.
Zenpai showed us a new tent recently, and
that might have been it.
That might have been it.
But let's not say anything else unless I can't remember if we're allowed to.
There's some pretty cool things going on. So that's all we'll say though.
Yeah.
That's for later this year, just for reference. Couple of last notes. Re-waterproofing. You can't reapply a PU coating or fix a delaminated laminated fabric once it's started. It's done. It's gone.
There is a video that I've done on how to re-waterproof your fabric.
Yep.
And that's probably as best as you're going to get.
Absolutely.
And that's to do with, and I will say that's to do with when that polyurethane coating is wearing away on the inside in smaller patches. If you can get onto it straight away, you can potentially delay that and get a longer life out of your tent, but it's certainly not something you can do when your whole fly's written off.
I think the manufacturer is probably a little bit misleading in some instances where they go waterproofer. It's maybe there's a silicone spray that you can get that probably will, but it's just an application on the surface.
Yeah.
The PU coating we're talking about is applied under pressure in a factory, squeezed in through the fabric.
Fibers,
like it's actually almost part of the fabric, not just a coating on the top. You really can't reapply that after it's broken down. And if your PU coating is gone down the hydrolysis path, it's done and dusted. It's gone. Just go and look for a new tent. Get excited and buy a new tent.
Yeah.
And I touched a little bit on UV damage before, but all these tests are done on new fabrics. As soon as you use it in the sun just degrades everything. And we could go down the path of talking about solution-dyed fabrics, which have a better UV resistance than, I don't know what the other name, like post-dyed fabrics, like it's actually colours dyed at the start. Zenpai's AeroSpeed tents use a solution-dyed fabric. That's got a better UV resistance. If it's got a better UV resistance, then that waterproofing is going to hold up for longer as well.
Yeah.
And one other note here, the tear strength. Obviously, the tear strength is really good to start with, but UV reduces that straight away. So just be considerate about where you set your tent up. Try and set it up in shade, trying to leave it up for days and days at a time. But at the end of the day, we go away for a week at a time. We set the tent up. It sits in the sun. The sun's on it. Like, just use your tent. Yeah. Don't stress over it. It's not going to fall apart on that camping trip. Eventually, it's going to degrade.
After years, it will.
I've got tents that I've used for many, many years and they're still fine, I clean them and you keep them stored well. And
I think I've said before, I've got an old Legionnaires style, straight up like the Dachi safari tent that I slept in when I was 6. Still got it.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't sleep in it in the rain, but still fully functioning canvas
Absolutely.
tent.
Yeah. So I hope that maybe overcomes some of the questions around fabric. What makes a waterproof fabric? Can you fix the fabric? All those sort of things, and possibly makes you just take a step back from getting too caught up in all the specifics of, is that got a higher waterhead than that? Because if it's 1,500, it's probably waterproof. If it's 5,000, it's still waterproof, but there's probably some barriers to that. And if it's a cheap tent with a huge waterhead rating, then you've got to ask the question around, have they just done that to look good on paper, when in actual fact the fabric, as soon as it goes in the sun for a little bit, is just going to tear apart.
Yeah.
Good quality brands though, like I'm talking Common, Austrail, Zempire, they've got lower price and high price things in their range. For the most part, they've tried to find that balance that meets, ease of mind for the customer. It is waterproof. It does have a good waterproof rating, but it's also durable for the price point that I'm paying.
Yeah.
Cool. Another Geek-Out done.
Another Geek-Out done. How many more you got left in you?
I don't know. Throw them at me. We'll see. If you've got any contradicting information, always happy to hear that. Because I've just taken what I've known from my 10 plus years in the industry, and then read some more, and then realized I was wrong on this or wrong on that, or didn't know that in as much depth as I thought. Always keen to hear other people's thoughts and opinions. So let us know on the Facebook group, where you can join in on the conversation with us and all our other suppliers and people in our little camping banter community.
Cool. Thanks, folks.
Thanks for watching.
Have
We'll see you next
a great week.
time. Bye.
See ya.